Berlin S-Bahn is a local service operated on the main line railway. It dates formally from around 1930, but in one sense this was a rebranding of the local services the railway already operated. However, there was one difference. The S-Bahn was fully electrified. Routes run on a basic frequency of once every 20 minutes, although I'll talk more about that later. And the name was originally SS-Bahn for Stadtschnellbahn, which is something like Rapid City Railway. The name of S-Bahn is more consistent with the already existing phrase U-Bahn. The forerunner of these local services was the Wannsee Railway, opened in 1891. It ran on its own tracks, fully separated from the long-distance lines, and ran parallel to the long-distance lines as far as Zehlendorf. You can just about see the line on this map. The line from Zehlendorf also ran directly ahead to Potsdam, but that stretch became disused because it was so close to the border. From 1900, tests with electrification were made on the Wannsee Railway, but until 1933, services were drawn by steam engines. So when S-Bahn lines run on the same stretch as longer distance lines, they are easy to differentiate, as seen here at Gesundbrunnen. The S-Bahn lines picks up its electricity from a third rail at ground level and uses 750 volts direct current, while the longer distance trains use an overhead catenary at 15,000 volts alternating current. The S-Bahn was greatly disrupted during the division of the city, when it suffered in the west but expanded in the east. Since the mainline railway was run by the DDR, so was the S-Bahn. There was a boycott in the west and then a strike in 1980, at the end of which only a couple of lines were left running in the west. The west did take over the S-Bahn in 1984, but by 1989 only about 50% of the network in the west was actually in service. This picture shows the signal box at Halensee station, which was the scene of a small but well-known occupation by strikers and forced expulsion by Eastern-controlled railway police. Since reunification, severed lines have been rejoined and the system upgraded, but not all the lines in the west have been reopened, so this is a constant source of discussion. This picture shows the Siemensbahn, which runs through Siemensstadt in the northwest. The S-Bahn has three main arteries. The Ringbahn was opened in 1877 to connect all Berlin's mainline stations. Going around the loop did not connect you directly with mainline stations, but it was possible for trains to move between stations using the Ringbahn. This is an old image, but you can see the distinctive shape of the Ringbahn, just like the head of a dog. The Stadtbahn was built in the 1880s and connected Charlottenburg station with the Ostbahnhof by virtue of a 12-kilometre elevated section running right across the city in a west-east alignment. In practice, the name Stadtbahn is also loosely and technically incorrectly used to describe this stretch between where it connects with the Ringbahn at Westkreuz and Ostkreuz. The North-South Tunnel was built between 1934 and 39 and is represented on this diagram by the continuous line running north-east. This diagram shows the tunnel during the division of the city. It travelled under East Berlin, but trains did stop at Friedrichstraße, where passengers could enter East Berlin or transfer to S-Bahn trains that terminated Friedrichstraße after coming in on the Stadtbahn. As regards the numbering, lines denoted by double numbers are branches of the basic route, for want of a better term. For example, the S25 and the S26 share a stretch with the S2. Further north, the S25 and S26 transfer off this common stretch and onto separate routes from each other. Now this map is a bit small, but it is enough to explain the basic details. Routes starting 1 and 2 use the north-south tunnel. These are shown in pink and green. Routes starting with 4 use the ring-barn, which is shown in different shades of brown. There is actually no S4, but the S41 goes clockwise and the S42 anti-clockwise. There are also some routes operating in the southeast of the ring and onto the southeastern districts of the city. Routes starting with S8 are north-south routes, which however also use the eastern part of the ring for part of their journey. These are shown in light green. The other routes use the S-Bahn, namely those starting with S3, S5, S7 and S9. There is no S6 incidentally. I have mentioned that the basic frequency is 20 minutes, but things are a bit more nuanced. Each line can have several Zugruppen, as shown here for the S1. Each group is named. So Paula runs the entire length of 51.7 kilometers, Panther runs for only 37.7 kilometers, and Pastor is shorter still. Although each of these groups operate on a 20-minute frequency, they don't all operate constantly. So for example, Paula is the basic service operating a 20-minute service. Whenever Panther is also operating simultaneously, the service will become a 10-minute service on average, but only along the routes served by Panther. Furthermore, stretches served by more than one route will have a higher frequency. For example, the common stretch served by the S2, S25 and S26, as I mentioned a couple of slides back. And finally, service will improve even further in exactly the same way on the likes of the S-Bahn and the north-south tunnel used by several lines. An exception to the basic timing is the ring-barn, which has a basic frequency of one train every 10 minutes. Both the S41 and S42 each have 2 Zuggruppen, so this service can go down to 5 minutes at times. Yeah, it might seem strange to some of us, but some residents of Tegel are complaining that they feel neglected because they only get one train every 20 minutes. If we go back to a picture that you have seen before, there is also a new S-Bahn line being built connecting the Hauptbahnhof to the Ringbahn, which you can see here in dotted lines. The Hauptbahnhof already lies on the S-Bahn. At the end of this brief introduction, there is a link to a longer video. I could perhaps here just mention briefly a major accident in 1922 caused by people travelling on the outsides of the train. This image actually stems from earlier, but shows the situation. In 1922, on the day that huge crowds were drawn to the funeral of Walter Rathenau, the foreign minister who had been assassinated by right-wingers, and the public transport system was under strain, certain passengers decided not to wait for the next train and decided to ride on the outside of a full train. In the region of Gesundbrunnen, 45 passengers were swept to their death, allegedly by a passenger carrying sticks of wood in his backpack. Right, so thank you for sticking with me if you're still here. Hopefully you will see a couple of links to a topic of this on the S-Bahn, and also to a playlist on Berlin in general. But I can also take an opportunity to make a brief mention of my book, Berlin, an A to Z Compendium. Right, anyway, thanks very much for staying with me, and cheers for now.